Hey, David here. Welcome. We're back for my weekly Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time tour of my library. So hopefully, people have been enjoying this series. Last week, I finished my Jewish section of my library. So hopefully, that was exciting. So it was kind of exciting for me. And sorry, just make a blessing. Have my coffee. So yeah, I figured I wanted to. I first thought maybe I would push off my Jewish section till last because it was the largest and needed organizing. And then one day I just got my act together and I organized my Jewish section over a few days. And yeah, I figured I'd try to get that in during Hanukkah. And so I actually wrapped it up during Hanukkah. And then from doing my Jewish section, I felt inspired to try to do a weekly stream on a Jewish topic because, like, obviously, Judaism is the topic I've studied the most, and I don't really have a venue to share or even to study my Judaism. Yeah, I mentioned going through. I started with the biographies of the sages, and I was saying how generally there's I studied in Orthodox yeshivas and for over a decade of my life was fully Orthodox Jew, studied on Orthodox rabbis, and Orthodox Jewry, Orthodox books are written by Orthodox rabbis for Orthodox Jews. If you call it like a hagiography, a seraphim, and it'd be similar for Christianity, like a hagiography, like Legends of Saints, is religious books are usually written by the priests or rabbis for their flock, and it assumes belief and it assumes certain acceptance of axes, like like that it's true, like that God um, deals with man through the religion. And then there's scholarly books, like in Judaism, most books on Judaism, Jewish scholars are Jews that have a pro-Jewish slant, and God forbid, there's counter-Semitic books, and there's also maybe neutral scholars that occasionally. So I mean, very few. You have a handful of non-Jewish scholars of Jewish studies, although almost all scholars of Jewish studies are Jews. However, Christianity is different. So you have books written for Christians that are assuming the truth of the veracity. Then you have scholarly books, and you have books written for a general audience. So like David going through my midlife identity crisis, where I probably majority thought like I was going to be an Orthodox Jew and I would be teaching Judaism to Orthodox Jews or to at least Jews who are interested in Orthodox Judaism. But to some extent, I'm a half Jew. I'm an outsider of the Orthodox Jewish community. No Orthodox Jew really is going to listen to me. So if you're an Orthodox Jew, you're going to listen to Orthodox rabbis. You're not going to listen to a half Jew Duvid, even if I went to Orthodox schools. So my message of Judaism is more for the goyim, for the non-Jews, and it's a different message that is looking at the sources differently. So Christianity is, even my father's ancestors were Christian, I'm forgetting the sect, if it was Methodist or Scottish American. And my grandfather, my father's father, already left the church. Hey, Monk, thanks for tuning in. So my father's father had already left the church, and even had stories of, God forbid, his mother, having died and having quite a bit of pain at the end of her life, and asking why God, if there was a God, why was she suffering so much? And my grandfather had maybe went to church as a kid a handful of times, but even relatively, my father's ancestors were not big Christians, although some of them had built churches, like in rural Missouri. I remember saying one of my ancestors studied the Bible in order to argue with preachers. So my father never grew up going to church. He might still be considered culturally Christian in the same way like assimilated Jews, that still his cultural practices are Christian. maybe his outlook is somewhat Christian, and so basically, I never went to church my whole life. I chose to be bar mitzvahed in Judaism on my own accord. I was the only one in my family. My mother had some sort of Jewish affiliation. My grandparents lit Hanukkah candles, and we had the Passover Seder together. So, God forbid, as a youth, I just kind of largely assumed religion was false. And even Judaism, I was bar mitzvah reform. I looked at largely it was false. Like Judaism was my cultural identity, and there was something to it, and I found it interesting and studied it. But I thought it was basically false legends that were made up. And until I went to Israel and became a born again Jew, so I don't want to talk about that too much or keep it to the subject of Christianity, but just say that I think it was Methodist, but I'm pretty sure it was Methodist, but it said my grandfather wasn't even a member of the church, so it'd be his ancestors. And I mean, my dad would know, but saying that we were never a member of church. Even my grandfather wasn't a member of a church. And actually, we have a family graveyard in Missouri. I was there earlier this year to bury the remnants of my grandmother, and it was actually a non-denominational graveyard. So there's a lot of crosses, but even going back 150 years ago, our family graveyard was non-denominational, not because possibly some Native American Cherokee blood. And although, God forbid, I don't want to be Elizabeth Warren on that. I can't verify my Cherokee ancestry, but you're just kind of agnostic, not even atheist. We weren't like strong atheists, but agnostic. So that even our family cemetery going back in Missouri, had people that didn't want a Christian burial. And so largely I got into Christianity, at least researching the subject, when I came back to Metro Detroit. So I mentioned, I got into Interfaith in New York, mostly with Muslims, and I dealt with Christians. And I hadn't even really read the New Testament. I read the New Testament in high school. Like I remember, I forget where, like a chess tournament or something. I had, I was an atheist in high school for a few years also, but as a Jew, you could kind of be an atheist Jew. So I had strong Jewish ethnic leanings, even going to Israel, even though I had atheistic leanings. So Christianity is not necessarily the same like that. But I'd read the New Testament. I'm not sure if it was a chess tournament or someone gave me a Bible, a small pocket Bible, and I'd read through it. In fact, I even remember the Sermon on the Mount I found moving, and I'd even copied it out to memorize the Sermon on the Mount. Not that I necessarily felt anything Christian, but even my youth, my teenage years, I felt that the Sermon on the Mount was maybe worth committing to a memory, and I remember copying that out to try to commit the Sermon on the Mount to memory. But when I came back to Detroit, I got involved in Interfaith, and I saw two things. I saw that people really believe in Christianity. I'd seen that as a kid, and I had friends like African American friend who we used to play video games with, and every time he beat me, he would he'd be like, "Thank you, Jesus," and like he would constantly pray, even like to win at video games, and like I respected his belief. He respected my Judaism. We talked a little bit about it, but so I said, okay, people believe even though it's not true, kind of like as a weakness or a crutch or whatever. But like I knew people actually believed in Christianity, but I thought there's just the fragility of the human condition. But after I became a born again Jew, and I became a strong believer in God and providence, and that prayer worked. I took the basic Orthodox Jewish view that God answers prayer even if you call God by the wrong name. So that religious Kabbalistic Jewish opinion that so to say Christianity is not true, but prayer works. So even if a person prays to Jesus, that God will answer their prayer even though they were called by so to say the wrong name, and that would apply to Krishna and other things. But I was kind of academic, and so I was always a reader. So when I came back to Detroit, maybe I had a handful. I'll show my books. Some of them might be a little bit older, and just looking at the long history. Someone who's scholarly. And I will show like probably the most thing that maybe I'll even go over these. I'll try to do my books first, but I started listening to the great courses, and me and my father have almost a complete collection. And I have listened to basically all me and my father even own almost all of the great courses, including on Christianity. So I'm looking here. It looks like they say that they have like um 55, maybe more. Like, so I've listened to over 50 courses from the great courses on Christianity. I took on edX, a lot of courses. So a lot of my knowledge from um, Christianity actually comes from the great courses, and like Bart Ehrman, I took all of his courses. And but I do have books. Some of these books I bought in New York, some of them I bought off the street. Some of them I read pretty intensely. They have other books from Interfaith, from like Mormons and Jehovah's Witness, and other things about American culture. I have a whole stack of books of Christianity that I bought and haven't read. So let me jump straight into the books, and I'll probably do them size first. I'll put them back on the shelf. And I have a whole bunch of Bibles. So I mentioned, similar to Judaism, there's sectarian books that were written by Christian groups for believers. There's sometimes books written by believers for non-believers. And then there's academic books that are written by academics for non-believers, or mixture, because like a lot of times books on Christianity sell better if they're not anti-believer. So even academic books on Christianity that kind of assume that Christianity is false recognize that the majority of the people who are going to buy the book are going to be believing Christians, and therefore they want to be believer friendly. Because if you write an academic book that's anti-Christian, it has a really small audience. Like academic books like that, maybe sell thousands, tens of thousands of copies at most. So even some like Bart Ehrman or popular authors that you recognize that he's not going to sell too many books if he alienates Christians from buying the books. And then you have actually books for priests, books for serious Christian academics on theology, and I'll show you a few of those. So let's get started, and I'll do these kind of based on size. So here is the Jesus Movement and its Expansion, Meaning and Mission by Sean Franey. And this is a Christian academic book. It's an academic book from a Christian institute, actually here in Michigan, Grand Rapids, and it deals with a somewhat academic look at the historical Jesus and his disciples and the early spread of Christianity. Very important topic. It's sometimes talked with Adam Green about just did Jesus even exist? And I have a few books on the historical Jesus, and then the apostles. So I mean, theoretically, there's 12 apostles, and they all opened up churches. All of the apostles have churches that they founded, around various places, like Peter, the Roman Catholic Church. There's the Greek Orthodox Church, the Ethiopian Church, the Armenian Church, and various of the disciples in the Gospels or historical record, or from the places that they went that were theoretically created by the disciples. So this is an interesting book, The Jesus Movement and Expansion, Meaning and Mission, Sean Franey. An important topic, like a lot of Christians don't even, name like who are the 12 disciples, what are the various churches that the 12 disciples founded, where do they go? And, you think like, okay, Roman Catholicism, Peter and Paul ending up in Rome, but the other disciples end up in different areas. And all of them basically win over converts, and those converts go on to found various churches. This is an interesting topic, Kabbalah related, Judea related, Enoch and the Messiah, Son of Man, revisiting the Book of Parables. It's edited, a collection of writings. This one, the Book of Enoch is in Hebrew, and the Hebrew Kabbalists also verify the Book of Enoch. It's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This one's more from a Christian perspective, and specifically this quote of the Son of Man that Jesus is referred to as the Son of Man, that comes from the Book of Enoch, and specifically this book of parables. Going to Enoch, so a collection of essays on that topic. Here is the Jewish Annotated New Testament by Amy Jill Levine, and she actually came to Temple Bethel, and this is kind of the Jewish interpretation of the New Testament, with notes adding in to make like a Jewish friendly version of the New Testament, and adding in basic rabbinic stuff that would help explain to Christians, or give some note of like a Jew friendly reading of the New Testament. Here's a Yale University Press, How the Bible Became Holy, and Michael Satlow, more about the canonization, the origin of the Gospels, when they first appeared, and how they became canonized and collected, and also including the Hebrew Scripture. So this book also includes the canonization of the Hebrew Gospels, the Hebrew prophets. So an interesting book. Some of that's in the Talmud, but just the basic history. What's in the Bible? How did it get there? How did it get the holy status? This one I think I actually bought it off the street in New York. Who's Who in the Bible and Old Testament, and the Apocrypha in the New Testament, and it's just like a dictionary entry. And there's a lot of names and a lot of places in the Bible. God forbid. There's a pretty big book, just like Encyclopedia Short Entries. There are thousands and thousands, maybe tens of thousands of names in the Bible and places. So, just the Bible of the who's who, very useful for Bible study. I'm going to come back to these books. I'm actually going to end up moving them. I'm going to create a different section in my library for Interfaith. And these books are about the World's Parliament of Religions in 1893, which I've talked about a few times. Talk about that a little bit more. So this is a really worn down book. This book was lent to me in Washington Square Park. God forbid, I think it even has a name and a phone number, and I never got it back to him. I read this book twice. This is a very interesting book. Louis Berkhoff, theologian, Systematic Theology, and this is a really good book. Like if you're serious about your Christianity, and you call like a systematic theology, the existence of God, the knowability of God, the attributes of God, the works of God, the doctrine of man in relation to God, man in the state of sin, the origin of sin, characters of sin, transmission of sin, punishment for sin, man in the covenant, grace, the doctrine of the person, the work of Christ, the office of Christ, the prophetic office, the priestly office, the doctrine of application, the work, and the redemption, the church as the means of grace, the word is the means of grace, the sacrament, baptism, the doctrine of the last things, eschatology. There's a few different types books like these. So this one I actually read twice, and this is probably the best book that I read from my collection. It's very Duvid's an engineer, a systematic thinker. So anybody who takes their Christianity seriously, especially preachers. Hey Jennifer, thanks for tuning in. Have probably read such books. Like I recently got another book, a different version of a systematic theology, and it quotes verses. And like a lot of times from Hinduism and Judaism, you have people who come much later and systematize the religion, because the actual holy books are scripture, and then you have the commentaries on scripture, and you don't really have systematic overviews of the religion and the philosophy of the religion till the Enlightenment. Even in Judaism, like the Ramban and the Mishnah Torah, and then later works. But till the Rambam, there wasn't really a systematic view towards Judaism. Maybe you could argue like Thomas Aquinas or something you had that in Christianity, but now you have modern forms where just systematic. What does the church believe? Organized in a systematic way. What's the purpose of religion? And then based on biblical verses and a history. So this one itself, Louis Berkhoff, Systematic Theology, and exceptional good book. But there's other forms of systematic theology, and so this one I actually read twice in New York. Just to understand Christianity, Christian doctrine, and there's a lot of interesting things. I say, like the church as a means of grace, or what do Christians actually believe? And I'm not sure what percentage of Christians would actually have read a book like that, or even would agree with the systematic view. Kind of like Scripture alone, or something like that, versus what does it mean to have a systematic understanding of Christianity? This is a really good book. This is an official Jehovah's Witness book. So Duvid spent like half a year studying the Bible with my local Jehovah's Witness, almost all African Americans. Jehovah's Witness came to my house, and like I always speak to them. I'll show other stuff in New York. Jehovah's Witness has really good Bible literature. And from a Judaic point of view, Jehovah's Witness are the least idolatrous because they don't believe that Jesus was God. They believe in Jehovah, the God of the Hebrew prophets, and Jesus just as like prophet or a different level. And so I actually went to my local Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall for a good few months, and studied the Bible with them. And mostly African Americans. They came to my house once or twice a week for Bible study. And I'm still pretty friendly. If Jehovah's Witness come to my house or I see them, I always speak with them. I know quite a bit. I've read quite a bit of their literature. So this is their like official book on their history and theology. What does it mean to be a Jehovah's Witness? It's called Proclaimers of God's Kingdom. And you could buy this online. This was actually given to me by my local witnesses. But it has the history of the original Jehovah's Witness. What does it mean to be to be a witness, and somewhat of their systematic theology and their hagiography of their history, where they have their church leaders. So anyone interested in Jehovah's Witness, recommend this book, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom, their official doctrine and history book. Here is Tyndale Handbook of Bible Charts and Maps with a CD inside. And I think I actually also got this one in New York. Most of the Christians I spoke to were on the street, but just maps, charts, going over the various books of the Bible, trying to show like land of Israel, names, places, history. So it's kind of like you reference a Bible study tool. Probably common thing for people that take their Bible study seriously. Tyndale, I think, is a pretty popular Christian publisher. Glib, thanks for tuning in. Wesley, thanks for tuning in. Okay, so this one I'm going to come back to. This is probably the second book. If I was going to recommend to get a book, it would be this book, Dispensational Truth of God's Plan and Purpose in the Ages, by Clarence Larkin. And people probably know Clarence Larkin. diagrams. So if you've seen Clarence charts, he's got these famous charts. He was an engineer, an architect, and then he was Baptist, and then he became born again and said he was going to decide to use his architectural skill to make these drawings. And so they're very well done drawings of Christian concepts, also Hebrew prophets, and the end of days, the descent of the soul, various things. So this book has the majority of his drawings with some commentary. So this from a Baptist point of view, and it might even be like Schofield, including things like the dispersion of the Jews and a pro. This is it's actually pre-State of Israel. I think this book was written in like 1918. So this book was written in 1918, but it's like a proto-Zionist, like Schofield Bible type dispensationalism. But this is a really great book. I'm not sure if anyone in the chat or people are familiar with these diagrams, but big fan of these diagrams. And maybe I'll look at some of these later on his official webpage. Here's just a generic. I think this is a Angus Consem's Historical Atlas of the Crusades. So obviously, Crusades a very important part of Christian history. So the Historical Atlas of the Crusades, like big picture books with maps. This woman's interesting. I met this woman. I used to follow her on Facebook. She has a YouTube page, Angela Cummings, inspired by the Great Commission's 45 countries in 45 years. And another one inspired by the Great Commission too, guilty of hate crimes in the Netherlands. And I actually met her. She came to Detroit, and I bought her lunch. I met her, and she was an interesting woman, like a born again preacher. She tells her own story, like she was about to abort her son, and Christian protesters outside the abortion clinic convinced her not to have the abortion, and she became a born again preacher and traveled around in like her car, preaching all over America and then all over the world. And she had a popular YouTube page, and she was really quite an exceptional street preacher. So I used to speak with her. We were friends on Facebook, and she also, God forbid, she had run-ins with the Hare Krishnas all over the place, because the Hare Krishnas are everywhere, and like in Russia, in Finland, in different places in the U.S. in New York City, and she would try to rebuke the Hare Krishnas also. And then I told her the famous verse that says, even if you say Krishna's name not purposely, that you'll be saved. So she stopped calling him the Hare Krishnas, and she started calling him the Harry something, God forbid. And then I think she unfriended me on Facebook like a few years ago. So I'm not sure if she's still traveling over the world. I think she got her hate speech case in the Netherlands beat, but she was on YouTube with popular videos of her street preaching. Angela Cummings, inspired by the Great Commission. Here's an interesting book. I think this is a Christian book, SCM Press. Biblical Hermeneutics, Holgate and Starr. And hermeneutics are pretty important. Interpretation and advanced biblical interpretation, exegesis. So, nice guide to hermeneutics. Yeah. Here's the classical writings of Billy Graham, Angels, How to Be Born Again in the Holy Spirit. Obviously, Billy Graham, one of the most well-known Christians in America, preachers, advisors to president. Even his son was involved in the election of President Trump. And so here's some of his writings on various topics. I had other books of his that I'm not sure if I lost them or don't have them anymore. Alexander to Constantine, Archaeology of the Land of the Bible. So this is just archaeology in the land of the Bible, important stuff. Here's Ancient Judaism and Christian Origins, Diversity, Continuity, and Transformation, George Nicholsburg. And I think this is also a Christian book. And you're just talking the historical background of the origins of Christianity, the historical Jesus, the main doctrines, and the spreading of the Gospels. And I think this is tried to be written academic, but in a Christian-friendly way. So, I have some more general history books. Generally, Jews don't study the Bible, period. There's even Taboo and Superstition. A Purple, thanks for tuning in. There's superstition in the Talmud of even reading books about Christianity. So you find like a lot of religious Jews would never read a book like this, like any of these. And really, till I was like close to 30, I didn't read any books on Christianity because I was caught up in severe Orthodox Judaism and was superstitious that I didn't even want to read this stuff. But later became more scholarly or less Orthodox, and I read quite a few books on Christianity. So here's some more, kind of generic book: Methodism, Empire of the Spirit, David Hempton, which is just a history of Methodism. I said my father's ancestors were Methodists originating in England in the 1730s and becoming, its kind of peak of international importance in the 1880s. Still, I think Hillary Clinton was a Methodist. Methodist has been on the decline, and almost all the new converts to Methodist now are African American. So I think now a Methodist in America is like 30-40% African American. But for a period of time, Methodism was one of the major denominations in America. Here, Lester Sumrall, The Names of God. God's name brings hope, healing, and happiness. And this kind of just a Christian version on like the power of God's name, talking about the different Hebrew names for God in the Hebrew prophets. But, it's a Christian book. Here, interesting book, Mormonism in America, The Power and the Promise. History of the Mormon Church, Latter-day Saints in America. I think it was written by Mormons, so it's like Mormon friendly, but tries to be academic, Osling and Osling. I remember my dad, I was living at home and I bought this book and my dad saw me reading it and he's like, yeah, he knows Mormon, you find it interesting, but he just doesn't have enough time to, this book didn't interest him enough. My dad's a bibliophile, has huge library, maybe even well more than 10,000 books. He likes fiction and science and various things. But he was saying like he didn't have time for this book, even though the topic was semi-interesting. And obviously my dad knows quite a few Mormons, just being a doctor, a worldly person. But this was a pretty good book just about the history of Mormonism in America, specifically how Mormonism became like a powerhouse of wealth and political power. And when Mitt Romney was running for president, and this is a good book. Hans Jonas, The Gnostic Religion, A Message from the Alien God and the Beginnings of Christianity. So a scholarly overview of Gnosticism and the main literature, tenets, language. So systems of thought. Gnosticism, very important. Like I mentioned, like the Demiurge and thoughts on reincarnation. Some of the early church fathers like Origen. So Duvid has leanings towards Gnosticism. A lot of scholars believe that Gnosticism, the origins of Kabbalah come from Gnosticism, although a lot of scholars from that think that Gnosticism sources from the ancient Greeks or possibly Hinduism in the Far East. So I have a few books on this topic, but this one was a pretty good one, The Gnostic Religion by Hans Jonas. I think this was translated from German. Here you got The Occult Renaissance Church of Rome, Michael Hoffman. So you may be like some of the Luke Ford guys, or God forbid, counter Semites are familiar with Michael Hoffman. He's one of the leading academic counter Semites, but he's also anti. I think he himself is a Christian, but he's a conspiracist and anti many types of Christianity. So here's the Cult Renaissance Church of Rome, which your revisionist historian Michael Hoffman penetrates the substrata of the Roman Church after it departed from 1400 years of Catholic orthodoxy, embraced institutionalized unequivocation and deceit, usurious money power, and diabolic occultism. So talking about the sneaking in of usury and occultism into Christianity. I have a few books actually from Michael Hoffman. Like in my counter-Semitic section, he has counter-Semitic books. He has books on economics and books on Christianity. He's a popular writer on the Unz Review. And I would say Michael Hoffman's definitely top 10, maybe top 5 academic counter-Semites in America, maybe even worldwide. Five Models of Spiritual Direction in the Early Church by George DeCampolis. It's talking about earlier sectarianism in Christianity in terms of spiritual direction. So it's got Anastasius of Alexandria, Gregory Nazianzus, Augustine, John Cassian, and Pope Gregory I. And what we call their different spiritual directions for the heart of Christianity. Interesting book. These books are all very interesting. Catholic Churches of Detroit, Images of America. So just pictures with little write-ups. So they had, Seraph, I'm not sure I pronounced that right. Maybe they've had it worldwide, like kind of, I think it was actually called Occupy the churches. So Detroit, had a lot of huge, beautiful Catholic churches. Think like E. Michael Jones and his book on, cities. And then now Detroit is almost all African American, and the ethnic communities moved to the suburbs. So the Catholic churches in Detroit, most of them are somewhat in ruins or unused. So there's 10 years ago, there was a movement to the mass movement, where like once a month they had mass in old cathedrals in Catholic churches in Metro Detroit. And it's probably like that all over the country. I think in Chicago they had a similar thing. And like anyone who follows E. Michael Jones or read his literature on urbanism, just related to demographic change, that most like Polish, Irish, Italian, people, when they moved to America, most of them moved to the cities, and they built these wonderful, glorious churches, and then in the 50s and 60s moved away from the urban centers to the suburbs, and some suburban areas built beautiful Catholic churches also, leaving the Catholic churches in urban areas largely unused, some of them even deteriorating in disrepair. So these images of America has the churches of Detroit. Okay. So here, American Catholic, the saints and sinners who built America's most powerful church, Charles Morris. It's an overview of Catholic history in America. Obviously, there's a lot of Catholics in America. There's tens of millions of Catholics. There's Catholics of all sorts of ethnicity. There were Catholics in America from the very beginning. So just have one book that has somewhat of an overview. I think even that 25% of 25% of schools in America are Catholic, and a lot of Catholic schools have very small student populations, like in rural areas. But a full 1 in 4 schools in America are Catholic. So big subject, just a random book. This was actually my Reform rabbi when I was a child who bar mitzvahed me, Rabbi Daniel Polish, who later stopped being a synagogue rabbi, temple rabbi, and went into Interfaith, working with the Catholic Church. So here's liturgical foundations of social policy in the Catholic Jewish traditions, Rabbi Polish and Eugene Fisher. And it was semi-interesting. Historical Origins of Christianity by Walter Williams. And I think I'm going to move this to my African section. So this is one of these African books that claims that Christianity arises from Africa, and I don't call it an anti-Christian book, but I'm going to put this with my African section. I have a few more books on a similar topic that claiming that Jesus is taken from the Egyptian gods. Torah Rediscovered by Ariel Devora Berkowitz. That was in my Christian section. So I'm going to put this back with my Judaica. Looks like this is more just a book on Psalms, and should have been in my Judaica section. History of the First Council of Nicaea, or the World Christian Connection, AD 325, with the Life of Constantine by Dean Dudley. Very important, historical. Just basically the origins of modern Christianity, coming with Constantine and the Council of Nicaea. So a nice semi-concise history of what led up to Constantine's conversion and the calling of the Council of Nicaea and what happened at the Council of Nicaea. a collection of prayers for specific needs. So I bought this off the street in New York, and a lot of these were based on Psalms, but most of these are just random Jesus prayers to saints, to martyrs, to various things, just a collection of prayers for specific purposes, like if you're sick or various reasons, organized by subject. Here's Volume 2, 170 prayers for your specific needs, biographies and photos of the saints. So, these are pretty popular type books among Christians. Praying to the saints or from specific things, just like within Judaism, among Hasidim. So I picked up these books off the street in New York. Here's another book on Constantine and the conversion of Europe. So this one also covers the Council of Nicaea and Constantine, but more post Constantine, and then the Crusade against Licinius, the Arian and Melitist controversies, the aftermath of the council, and so one of the most important topics in the history of Christianity, the Council of Nicaea, and leading to the eventual conversion of Christianity. Here is Wisdom from the Monastery, the Rule of St. Benedict for Everyday Life by Patrick Barry. So it has some of the original translation of St. Benedict's rules and some commentary for the Benedictine monks, the monk lifestyle. Also important media hits. Well, you have your own channel, you're inviting me. This is a really good book. This is a Mormon book. I had Mormon missionaries that came to my house, and I studied with them for a few months, and I went to my local Mormon church for a few months, and someone there gave me this book. This is a famous Mormon book, Jesus the Christ by Talmage, and I think Talmage was one of their prophets, church fathers from 1915. So James Talmage wrote this book in 1915, Jesus the Christ, and it has the Mormon version of church history, including their conceptual prehistory of Jesus before creation to the generic history of the Hebrew prophets in the Bible with the Mormon add-ons. So going through the biblical history and the kings of what they believe are the tribes that left for the Americas, and then they believe that Jesus reappeared other times, and then the history of a resurrection or appearance of the groups in Northern America. So actually the Mormon add-ons to this book are minimal, maybe 15-20% of the book, generic reasonable Christian history, but also the Mormon perspective. This is I think one of the basic Mormon books for Mormons. Talmage was one of their church fathers, codifiers, 1915. This book was given to me. I went to a mass in the Catholic Church by the diocese. It was a special mass for business and the promotion of Detroit, where non-Catholics were invited and encouraged to come. And they gave away this book, The Second Greatest Story Ever Told, Now is the Time of Mercy. And it is the story of Pope John Paul II. And pretty good biography. It's a Catholic book. They gave it away. I went to Mass, maybe the only time in my life I ever went to Catholic Mass. And it was part of an interfaith business thing for Detroit. But I sat through the Mass, and then they had a breakfast, and they gave out this book afterwards. Here's The Jewish Jesus by Peter Schaeffer, How Judaism and Christianity Shaped Each Other. Peter Schaeffer is one of the few non-Jews who was in Jewish studies, and he actually lost his job. That he was at like a museum, and I think he's German. It might be translated, and he lost his job because they outed him because he wasn't Jewish, and they felt that it wasn't right to have a non-Jew heading Jewish studies. But I also have his book on the origins of Kabbalah, and here he writes about the interplay back and forth between Judaism and Christianity, how Judaism shaped Christianity, then how in return Christianity reshaped Judaism. Here's another basic book, Bible study tool, outline of the Bible, book by book. Here's basic introduction, Bible study tool. Here's another Michael Hoffman book. I actually like Michael Hoffman books. Like, I mean, God forbid he's one of the leading counter-Semites. Like, I like Kevin McDonald. I like E. Michael Jones. They're good academics. They write good books. They know a lot of information. I would put them probably as maybe like just the three top counter-Semites in America: Michael Hoffman, E. Michael Jones, Kevin McDonald. But Hoffman's a really good scholar, knows a lot about the topic, and so this one, usury and Christendom, the mortal sin that was and now is not, and just talking about how usury was reaccepted into the church, and now usury is mainstream, and like basically all Christians do it, and how that came into being. So Michael Hoffman, also a regular writer for Oons. This is a popular book, David McCallum. He has all sorts of history books on the Reformation and history. So, important history of the Reformation, and Martin Luther and Erasmus and various names. I read this book in New York. So McCallum's pretty respected mainstream historian, somewhat neutral. He probably wants to keep a Christian audience, but good, decent read. This book my tenant gave me. I had a Catholic tenant, and I guess she wanted to show me the glories of Christianity, so she gave me this book. It was actually a pretty good book. Rescued the Unexpected and Extraordinary News of the Gospel by Father John Ricardo. So just, I guess this is a book that they give, to Catholics, and to like born again Catholics. So generic overview of some Christian theology, generic uplift message, Catholic perspective. Walter Brumguide's Worship in Ancient Israel, an essential guide. So kind of like a Judaism 101 for Christians book. I think I'm going to move this book and put it somewhere else. So this is the Greater Key of Solomon. I actually bought this off the street. I'm going to put it with my Kabbalah books. This is an apocryphal book. Supposedly Solomon had written more books, and the Greater Key of Solomon, that includes some things about like astrology and various things, more popular among Christians than Jews. But I'm going to move this to my Judaic section, although most Jews don't accept the veracity of it. Also, the sixth and seventh books of Moses and the magical uses of Psalms. So I bought this off the streets, Apocrypha, not even popular Apocrypha. I might even put this with my African section, because a lot of this is, kind of this Moses as an Egyptian. So tough to know where to place this, but the supposed sixth and seventh books of Moses. Here, Welcoming the Light of Christ, a commentary on the promise of his glory, service, and prayers for the seasons of all saints to Candlemas. So just a collection of prayers for Christians with Commentary, and another Christian book, The Mystery of Christ, the Liturgy as Spiritual Experience, that just kind of how to understand the Christian prayer at a deeper level. I got here, I have a whole bunch of Bibles. These books here are books I haven't read yet because honestly, I haven't studied that much Christianity. So, like, relative to the amount I read, like, I'm a big reader. So, relative to how much I read, I actually haven't read that much about Christianity. Okay, so let me do my Bibles. So I got a whole bunch of Bibles. Like, a lot of these were given to me. So here's just the New Testament with Psalms and Proverbs. I'm not sure which organization, but someone just were handing these out somewhere. Here's Sing Out Joyfully to Jehovah. This is the songbook of Jehovah's Witness, music notes. And actually, they have very good music. It was interesting because, like, I went to my Jehovah's Witness local Kingdom Hall for almost half a year, almost all African American. And the hymns are, like, almost all Germanic. A lot of the hymns, were written in, I forget if Jehovah's Witness originated in Europe. I think it originated in America, but among mostly Germans. So but it was also popular in Germany. But I remember they had pretty good music, pretty good hymns, and here is the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures, the Jehovah's Witness, and it's a pretty good Bible. It's like, because it's Jehovah's Witness, it has a slightly different take than most Christian Bibles, and it has a nice cross-reference index of verses. Here is my King James. So David's got a King James here also. And here's the New World Translation. So just, there's a lot of different Bible translations. So here's the New World Translation. I think this one was given to me. Not sure where I got that. This one was also handed out at university. I think even when I was in Stony Brook, and I actually read through this one. This was really interesting. This is the Recovery edition of the New Testament, and it's some Eastern denomination, and it does not start with the Hebrew prophets. It's just the New Testament. It has a commentary under it, and it's more kind of like almost an avatar version of Christianity, where Christianity, Mims, thanks for tuning in, where Christianity is not based on fulfillment of the Hebrew prophecies, but like more like Eastern Christians, where Jesus is somewhat just seen as some straight God-man figure. But it's actually pretty interesting commentary, the Recovery version of the New Testament, and I think it was some Chinese Christians, maybe I'm pretty sure they're Chinese Christians. So this one I actually read through with their complete commentary. Is very interesting. So I mentioned I studied through the Mormon texts, and so just to mention it, like, I was friendly with the Mormons. They were coming to my house. I was feeding them. They actually helped me out with my yard work. Like, they're pretty nice. Like, they offered to help me with my yard work. And like, I went to church and we were doing Bible study with them regularly. And they were kind of like young from the West Coast. And, I took them to lunch at the local kosher pizza place. And then after a while, they were like, well, David, you going to convert or not? I was like, no, I'm not going to convert. Like, I like you guys. I like doing the Bible study, but I'm not going to convert. And then, they stopped doing the Bible study after a while. I guess they wanted to win converts. So we went through and I studied with them the Book of Mormon. So, the Mormons have, this is what Joseph Smith translated from the tablets, and it has like the Book of Nephi, and it also has like the history of the witnesses of Joseph Smith and the testimony of the witnesses who saw him transcribe it. So the Book of Mormon refers to the supposed tablet text that Joseph Smith received and are the extra biblical books that include add-ons to the Hebrew prophets and the New Testament and tell about things that happened long ago. And then there's what's called the Doctrine and the Covenant in Pearls of Great Price. So the Book of Mormon is Joseph Smith's there's actually a Book of Mormon, one of the books, but there's like the Book of Nephi and Messiah and Enos and Moroni and things. So those are the additional historical gospels that Joseph Smith received in his tablets. Then it has Doctrines and Covenants, which is kind of like the establishment of the Mormon Church doctrine from Joseph Smith. And then you have Pearl of a Great Price, which is kind of like a historical of the story of Joseph Smith and even like some prophecies about like the New Jerusalem in Missouri and future prophecies. So if you're Mormon, the Bible includes these things. So if you go to like a Mormon services, they have also music. They have pretty good music, like nice congregational singing. They have their own chants and songs, and they have sections where they read scripture. And when they read scripture from all of these books. They'll read scripture from the Hebrew prophets, from the New Testament, from the Book of Mormon, from Doctrines and Covenants, and Pearl of a Great Price. And so all of those are like part of Mormon scripture. So I actually studied this with Mormon missionaries over a period of months and like read through it, and we talked about it, and I went to their church. But then they kind of like, were you going to convert or not? And I didn't convert, and they gave up on me, God forbid. So here, this is a Jehovah's Witness textbook. So for a period of time, I was going to the Jehovah's Witness, and they were studying from this. And so this was Jesus, the way and the truth and the life. And they went through a chapter. I think they met like 2 times a week, night Bible sessions, and they went through a chapter a week, and they had songs, and then they would take comments, and people would speak and give insight. And I actually like the witnesses. Like if I was going to be a Christian, I would probably be a witness. I mean, I like the Mormons too, actually. But if I was going to be a Christian, I would probably be a witness. And like their Kingdom Hall, their Bible study is very nice. So this was a book that they used inside the witness, the Kingdom Hall, to study. I have more of these, but these are like the Mormon books that they hand out, that they leave at your door. Some of these I got in New York on the street. So I worked in New York at the Department of Buildings. Like I mentioned that there were African Americans who would sell like anti-Semitic literature and African literature. But there was also Jehovah's Witnesses out there regularly. And they have, like, besides like the pamphlets, they have a bunch of more advanced books and stuff. And a lot of times they would give it away, or sometimes they take a donation. So this one was pretty interesting. Jehovah's Witness, the divine name that will endure forever and ever, about the name Jehovah. This is even See the Land, about the land of Israel, like maps and history, a nice kind of overview of the land of Israel. Here's a pretty famous Jehovah's Witness one. What does the Bible really teach? And like an overview of the Jehovah's Witness theory of how you should understand the Bible. Here's a Jehovah's Witness commentary on Isaiah's prophecy, Light for All Mankind, Volume 1. And it's actually very good commentary. And they're on Daniel also. Pay attention to Daniel's prophecy. The Jehovah's Witness commentary on the prophecies of Daniel. Another witness book, Worship the Only True God. I don't think these are witness. This, I'm not sure, Our Daily Bread. RBC. This is a different radio Bible class. Some just random Christian event must have gave that to me. This is actually another good witness literature. The Bible, God's Word or man's word, and it just trying to prove that the Bible is divinely origin. So I'm actually a big fan of the witness literature. I think in terms of Christianity and Bible commentary, the Jehovah's Witness are probably up there with some of the best literature. This is from the Latter-day Saints, The Restoration and the Gospel of Jesus Christ. This RBC Ministries, I'm not even exactly sure where I got this from. Some missionaries of Why is Life So Unfair, Psalm 73, and Jesus Blueprint for Prayer. So I think they were African Americans, but I don't even remember offhand where I got those. So those are the books I have on my shelf. I don't think Adam Green has interviewed any witnesses. They definitely have. The witnesses also believe in replacement theology. So I mean, they also believe that they're the new church, and they believe that the covenant with the Jewish people has been nullified. And actually, they debated and argued for tens of hours, like literally tens of hours, with my local witnesses about the dual covenant or replacement theology. So I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses do believe that they are the new Israel, and that the old covenant with the Jewish people is no longer valid, and that there's a new covenant, but the new covenant is best seen through the witnesses, and that the Catholics and even the Protestants are false version of Christianity. And I'm not sure if you would find an official witness if they would come on like a show and just talk. I mean, you have former Jehovah's Witnesses that are popular. I'm not sure if witnesses do debates like that. And they actually have a pretty big hierarchical top-down doctrine. So let me show these books real quick. So my grandfather's grandfather was a participant in the 1893 World's Parliament of Religion as a rabbi, and he spoke at a breakout session about the value of education to eliminate poverty. Rabbi Bamberger, who was the head of the Jewish Workmen's School, related to the Workmen's Circle. They'd been a rabbi in Breslau in Germany at the famous Reform Academy, and found work first at the Workmen's Circle in New York and then in Chicago, to where my mom lived. Constitution, Shahak. I'm familiar with Shahak. I'm not sure I've read his book. I've seen some interviews with him. Okay, Seraphim, thanks for tuning in. So probably the biggest interfaith in the history of the world was the 1893 World's Parliament of Religion. And one of the organizers was John Burroughs. The most famous speaker there ends up being Vivekananda, who actually was like a walk-in. He wasn't even on the registrar, and he came like unannounced and was able to become a speaker, and they even made him one of the keynote speaker, and he's one of the most remembered. Yeah, I'm familiar with Shahak, but I don't have his books. So I have a few books on it. Here's The World's Parliament of Religion, The East-West Encounter, Chicago, 1893. An overview, Indiana State University Press. And here, so the president of the Interfaith who organized it, spent years doing it, and he actually worked with well, the name's slipping me, the scholar in Germany who was the big appropriator of Aryan invasion theory in the Vedas, and scholar of religion at the time, but he advised him on different people to come. And so Burroughs was the overseer. He's a Protestant evangelical, and he was one of the organizers, invited all of the people who came, and he also took notes and transcripts and published a book of all of the various speeches of the people at the parliament. And so this is a 2-volume book. This one's like almost 800 pages. I have volume 2. I haven't read it. So I would like to do more. So I like an interfaith, and I would like to possibly do some streams covering just the World Parliament of Religion 1893, which is a extremely important event. There's later, like the Pope had a big interfaith event in Assisi decades ago. It had like the Dalai Lama, but the 1893 World's Parliament of Religion is probably the biggest interfaith ever in the history of the world, and sets the stage for all later interfaith. My YouTube channel, I had interfaith on it, so hopefully you'll see more topics. Like the multiple truth hypothesis was created for interfaith. Like most of my experience with Christianity is interfaith. So stay tuned for more content on interfaith, and hopefully I'll do a stream just on the World's Parliament of Religion in 1893, an extremely important book. So an extremely important historical event that Duvid's grandfather's grandfather, Rabbi Bamberger, was one of the participants. Constitution, how many books have I read? I wouldn't be surprised if I've read like 10,000 books in my life. I mean, all the books on my shelf, like over 90% of them I've read. So usually like the books on the shelf, I put them there after I've read them. And so I have like a lot of other books on the floor and upstairs that I haven't read. There's a lot of books that I've read that I haven't bought, that I took from libraries or various cases. Like I was in Israel, like I went profusely through libraries, or I'm always reading if I stay at someone's house, and they have books, like I'll skim through or read their books. So I wouldn't be surprised. I've definitely read thousands of books. I might even be around 10,000, and I don't read fiction, and I read books now mostly online. Like I pound through probably a book a day. Like I have courses on my YouTube on speed reading. So like Duvid's a speed reader. Duvid even teaches speed reading. Maybe 10,000 is too high, but it depends what you include as a book. Because now, like if I read a book a day, that's that'd be like 1,000 books every 3 years. 10,000 would be 30 years, and like I wasn't always such a speed reader, but definitely well over 5,000 books. And I spend probably half of my day reading. Duvid always carries books with me everywhere I go. I have books I'm always reading. Anytime I have a downtime, I spend it reading. And probably half of my day I'm basically in my house, sometimes with internet content or educational content in the background, reading. Okay, so these are Christian books that I bought that I haven't read. So a lot of these I bought. There was a bookstore in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I was at University of Michigan called Shaman Drums. So anyone in Michigan maybe would be familiar with Shaman Drums. It was a very popular bookstore at University of Michigan, and they went out of business, and they had a going out of business sale, and I bought like 1,000 books from them. And at the end, they were selling books for like $1 a piece. Like they started like 50% off, then like 75% off, then like 90% off, and then they were just like $1 each. So like when they started 50% off, I spent like hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. Like I spent thousands of dollars buying books off of Shaman Drums as they went out of business. And towards the end, they were just like dumping them for like $1 a piece. And I bought hundreds of books off of them. So I'm not sure if I bought, maybe I bought as many as like 1,000 books off of Shaman Drums in Ann Arbor when they went out of business. And they had really good books. Like it was a university bookstore. A lot of the books were kind of expensive books. And no, I don't actually have any books from Seventh-day Adventists. I forget where I was. I was once somewhere that had some Ellen White books, and I read through some of them. I'm not sure about On-Scene Warfare, Lorenzo Scopoli. Um, I mean, time is limited, so like now I'm going to show you some of the books that I bought and haven't read. So I would like to, like I said, like, and after this, I'm gonna like what I do is listen to the great courses, and I've probably listened to about 50 great courses, and I listen to those in 2-speed because like time is limited. Christianity is not one of my main areas of research. Like I'm not a Christian. Like I do some interfaith, or just from talking to people, or historical interest. So I would say like Christianity does not interest me all that much. It's just the fact that Christianity is such a profound influence on the West and American society that I've read it so much. Just to be like, well, I would say like sports. I like sports is a huge influence on society. I've read less than 10 books on sports. I don't even know if I have like basically no books on sports. But I mean, Christianity, at least academic, it's related to Judaism. I have close to 100 books on Christianity. So I'm not sure, like, like I'm going to show the books that I have bought and haven't read yet. And who knows if I'll have time to read them. So here, My Eyes Have Seen the Glory, A Journey into the Evangelical Subculture in America by Randall Bulmer. So, definitely evangelicalism is one of the important factors in American politics. Evangelicals represent like 40% of U.S. religious. Actually, a lot of blacks, Protestants are considered evangelicals. The Republican Party, the original alt-right, but like Trump supporters are mostly evangelicals. So just an important topic. I figured, okay, learn something about it, and this is a Shaman Drum book that went out of business like over 10 years ago. So these were books, like academic books, I bought at Shaman Drums. I still haven't read them. I bought this over 10 years ago. Another Shaman Drum book, Black Religion After the Million Man March by Baker Fletcher. So, just Black Christianity. People remember, I think Louis Farrakhan was one of the organizers of the Million Man March. So, Black Religion After the Million Man March. This was another academic book from Shaman Drums. Some of these books might actually be semi-valuable. See, got quite a bit of dust on them even. Tools for Peace, The Spiritual Craft of Saint Benedict, and Rene Girard. So I know Kevin Barrett, I think, is a big Rene Girard fan, or translations. This by Andrew Marr. I think Rene Girard is recent. Mimetic Theory. So this is probably an interesting book, spiritual book. It's never had Tools for Peace, Spiritual Craft of Saint Benedict and Rene Girard. Never had a time to look at it. Women in the Redemption, A Theological History, Rosemary Ruther. Just like the popular type books you find nowadays about women that were important women overlooked in the tradition. I think this was also a book I got from Shaman Drums. American Catholic, A History, a Documental Reader, edited by Mark Massa. So this is actually a collection of documents going back to Sublimus Deus from 1537, meetings with Indians. So this is probably a pretty good book, a collection of American Catholic documentary history. So another Shaman Drum book I got, just never had time to look at. Essential Catholic Social Thought by Bernard Brady. Another Shaman Drum, Orbis books. A few of these Orbis books, just interesting books I never had a chance to look at. So God willing, maybe I'll have a chance to read through these one day. Who Wrote the Gospels by Randall McCrew Helms. Maybe I did read this one. But academic Millennium Press probably meant Who Wrote the Gospels. I thought maybe get more involved with like Adam Green and some like scholarship on the historical Jesus. Maybe I'll read these books one day. How the Bible Works, an Anthropological Study, Evangelical Biblicism. So I'm sure it's like a Bible 101 for evangelicals. Christian Moral Reasoning, an Analytical Guide by Garth Hallett, University of Notre Dame Press. It's an important topic, moral reasoning. Most of these, I said, these are books I bought from Shaman Drum when they went out of business over 10 years ago, and just never had a chance to look at. Evangelicals and Fundamentalists, a documentary reader, like a Catholic history. So it would be source documents of evangelicals and fundamentalism. It has a lot of stuff about the Scopes trial. This one I started reading. I read like the first quarter of it. I only have volume 1, A History of Christianity in Asia, volume 1, beginnings to 1500. So a lot of interesting history of like the St. Thomas in India, the earliest recording of some of the apostles went east or theoretically went east, and legends. So it's an interesting book. I tried to read this. I got a few hundred pages in, and then put it down and got caught up in other things. And I figure I would probably just start from the beginning if I had a chance to read it again. So I think I did read these books. So here's actually the Community of Religions, Voices and Images from the Parliament of the World's Religion. I think this is actually the 1993 one, where they tried to have a 100th year anniversary Parliament of Religion, and so this includes some gatherings from the 1993 version, and this is another one, The Dawn of Religion. Voices from the World's Parliament of Religion, 1893. I have a bookmark in it. Looks like I got more than 2/3 into it, and by subject. So this is something I'm going to turn back to, and I might do a whole separate stream where I probably I only have like 10 books on it, but I would like to do a whole separate stream on the World's Parliament of Religion. So my dad gave me this book. This I've seen lectures. I didn't actually read it. Maybe one day. Zealot: The Life and Times of Jesus, by Reza Islam. So this one I read also. Exhibiting Mormonism: The Latter-day Saints in the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. So the Mormons were present at the 1893 World's Parliament of Religion, and so that has a history of Mormonism at the World's Parliament of Religion. Do these somewhat by size, so I just stack them. I might read I read biographies at night. I might put this Confessions of a Jewish Priest, from secular Jewish war refugee to physicist and Episcopal clergyman, by Gabriel Weinreich. So a Jew who converted to Christianity and even became a priest and a physicist. So I might actually put this next to my bed. I usually read biographies before I fall asleep. So I haven't read that one yet. Genesis, translation and commentary, Peter Alter. I think this is written for Christians. I had this with my Christian books. I'm not sure if I'll, look at it. Just a generic, another new translation of the book of Genesis, like written by a Jew for Christians. This one looked interesting. This one I've had for a long time. Cross-examinations, readings on the meaning of the cross today. Marit Trestland, a collection of articles on the meaning of the cross, symbology. Our Father Abraham, Jewish roots of the Christian faith. I think I actually read this book, but I'm not sure. Our Father Abraham, Jewish Roots of the Christian Faith, Marvin Wilson. Here's Thomas Cahill, The World Before and After Jesus, Desire of the Everlasting Hills, popular history author Thomas Cahill on a whole bunch of subjects. Here's C.S. Lewis. My dad gave me the whole C.S. Lewis philosophy collection, but here's C.S. Lewis on Mere Christianity. A very popular book. Prophetic Politics, Christian Social Movements in the American Democracy, by Guterman, Cornell. And Practical Theology, Perspective from the Plains. So I have other books that I'll call like interfaith books that I have in a different section that have collections of different religious views towards things like altruism or various things in a different section. Here's Apostle Life of Paul by John Pollock. I know Adam Green's doing deep dives. Life is short. I thought to be an expert more in Christianity. Jim, nice to see you. Yeah, so I was mentioning, Jim, that there was this famous bookstore, Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, Shaman Drums, and it was around for decades, and they went out of business, and their books were expensive. Like the books would cost it was a university books, and it was before, even Amazon, before it was more difficult to just buy them on the internet. The Gospel of Judas, the discovery of the Gospel of Judas Apocrypha, and The Messiah, formerly known as Jesus, Dispatches from the Intersection of Christianity and Pop Culture. So Jim, I was saying I bought 100, maybe 500 books off of this book, Shaman Drums. I spent a good few $1,000s. This University of Michigan bookstore that was one of the most popular bookstores in Ann Arbor, Michigan for decades, and then all of a sudden it went out of business. And their books were 25% off, then 50% off, then 75% off, then 90% off. And then all of a sudden they were $1 each. So I bought a lot of them, even 50% off. I spent close to $1,000 when they were 50% off. But by the time they were $1 each, I literally bought 300-400 books off of them. And so a lot of these books are academic books on Christianity that I just never had a chance to read. So that does it for my Christian books. So stay tuned for a future stream on the 1893 World's Parliament of Religion. And let me show a few things. In fact, if you want to chat, Jim, I'll even put the link in the chat if you want to talk a little bit. So let me show. I mentioned the Clarence Larkin book in his charts. So Larkin. Some of these are really exceptional pictures. So I said that was probably my favorite book of these like biblical guides. So here's the mountain peaks of prophecy that has like a view of what the earliest prophets saw, what they missed, the valley of the church, and there's various versions of it. So that's probably the book I recommend the most. So what I will show is the great courses. So I've listened to basically all of these. So the majority I've read, decent amount, like as in compared to the amount that I read, relatively I have not read that much on Christianity, and just seeing that I have like 20 pretty good academic books that on Christianity that I still haven't read. Maybe like Luke Ford, the subject just isn't one of my peak interest subjects. But I did listen to almost all of the great lecture courses. So this from oldest to newest. The Philip Carey on Augustine, Philosopher and Saint. Philip Carey, I've listened to almost all the Philip Carey and Bart Ehrman, Philosophy and Religion of the West. So Bart Ehrman has like 10 courses on the teaching company, the New Testament. William Cook, also a popular teaching comp on Francis of Assisi. Bart Ehrman's Historical Jesus, that was one of the first ones I listened to. Here's one, the Life and Writings of C.S. Lewis. I mentioned Amy Jill Levine, who wrote the Jewish New Bible Reader. So she's got a course on the great courses. Brad Gregory, History of Christianity in the Reformation Era. That was a pretty good one. And you mentioned the book by McClowell on the Reformation. That's a famous book, but this Gregory course was a good one. Patrick Allett, popular teaching course. He came from London. I think he ran for Congress. He's got a lot of teaching company courses. This is on American religious history. This is also very interesting, like sectarianism. Luke Timothy Johnson's course on the Apostle Paul, and early Christianity to experience the divine, of kind of early spirituality in Christianity. Joseph Katersky's Natural Law and Human Nature, also a good course. Amy Jill Levine, Great Figures of the New Testament. Bart Ehrman, Lost Christianity's Christian Scripture and the Battles Over Authentication. Said I listened to all of these courses. They're really, most of them in double speed, but so majority of my knowledge of Christianity comes from the great courses. Jim, I'm probably going to wrap up maybe in the next 20-30 minutes. So a different time. I'm going to stream Saturday night on the history of Hasidim coming to America. So part 2, I'm going to cover Hasidim in America Saturday night. Next week, I'll do another tour of my library, maybe business books. So I have to organize more parts of my library. So probably next week, I'll probably do like business books or possibly psychology or linguistics. I'll have to see how easy it is to organize my books. But next Wednesday, 4 p.m. also. From Jesus to Constantine, Ehrman's History of Early Christianity, William Cook, St. Augustine's Confessions. So I listened to, like, I haven't read Confessions, but I listened to Cook's course on it. Jesus and the Gospels, Luther, Gospel, Law, and Reformation, Philip Carey, Bart Ehrman, After the New Testament, the Writings of the Apostolic Fathers, Also, Bart Ehrman, History of the Bible, The Making of the New Testament Canon. Science and Religion, Lewis Principle. That was a very good course. Changed my perspective. Academic, just the history of science and the, kind of dispelling the history of, the modern understanding of religion and science being at odds with each other. Science largely arose from Christianity, so that the course Lawrence Principle was pretty good. Popes and the Papacy, Thomas Noble, that was a good course, long course going through the whole history of the popes. Book of Genesis, Gary Rendsburg, Story of the Bible, Lives of the Great Christians, William Cook, another interesting biography of life of great Christians. That was one of the earliest courses I listened to. Reason and Faith, Philosophy of the Middle Ages, not just Christianity, but most of the Western tradition, almost all of them are Christian. Mystical tradition, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Philip Carey, History of Christian Theology. Nice overview of the history of Christian theology. Biblical wisdom literature, Joseph Katersky, covering like Proverbs and some of the Apocrypha. Francis Ambrosio, Philosophy, Religion, and the Meaning of Life. William Cook, Catholic Church and the History, so as the one of the popes and the papacy and the Catholic Church of history. Tyler Roberts, Skeptics and Believers, Religious Debate in the Western Intellectual Tradition. Gary Rendsburg's on the Dead Sea Scrolls. Mark Muse, Confucius, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad. It's also an interesting one, just looking like a Freemasonic approach of great men. William Cook's The Cathedral. That one's like DVD, really nice graphics. William Cook has a lot of good courses. The History of Catholicism. The Cathedral is a really nice course with especially Duvu likes architecture, and has he actually goes on site and shows the engineering and all the details of the churches and the history and the overview. That one's definitely one of my favorite courses. The Cathedral, William Cook. Holy Land Revealed, Jody Magnus. That was a pretty good course also. Apocalypse, Controversies, and Meaning in Western History, Craig Kostler. You're definitely interesting on apocalyptical views. History of Christianity from the Disciples to the Dawn of the Reformation, Luke Timothy Johnson. Great Controversy is the Early Christian History, another Bart Ehrman course. He has a lot of courses, so at this point there's like a lot of things he's covered in other courses, but just to put it in one course, the history, the Great Controversy, Early Christian History. The World of Biblical Israel, Cynthia Chapman. How Jesus Became God, that's probably Bart Ehrman's most popular course. Very interesting, kind of culmination of Bart Ehrman, all the scholarship, How Jesus Became God. Bart Ehrman's popular book and the teaching company's courses. Another William Cook's book, The World's Greatest Churches. So he has the Catholic Church that covers almost all Gothic churches, Catholic churches, and the world's greatest churches that is worldwide and covers the full gamut of history, including modern megachurches. Gnosticism, From Nag Hammadi to the Gospels of Judas by David Brock. It was an important course, like Gnosticism, subject that interests me. I have quite a few books I've read online, like bootleg copies on that, because it's hard to find good books on Gnosticism, or they're kind of expensive. The Great Works of Sacred Music, Charles McGuire. Another Judy Magnus, Jesus and His Jewish Influences. Reading Biblical Literature, Genesis to Revelation, Greg Kostler. Books That Matter, The City of God. So I listened to the St. Augustine's Confession and The City of God. So I haven't read either one of those books, but I took both of those courses. I also had Dante on Dante's Inferno, and Machiavelli's The Prince. So other great courses. The Apocryphal Jesus by David Brocke. What do you know about Jesus from the Apocryphal, non-canonical, The History of Christianity 2, from the Reformation to the Modern Megachurch. Biblical Hebrew, Learning a Sacred Language. So I went through that too, refreshed some of my Hebrew skills. with the great courses. I just download their course in Japanese, but I'm not sure how much I'll get out of that. But Hebrew I know decently. Understanding the New Testament, Braque, understanding the Old Testament, Miller. A lot of these are just kind of generic, but I listen really all of these. So I say the majority of my knowledge of Christianity comes from these great courses, and I've listened to over 50 of them just on Christianity, the history and archaeology of the Bible, Jean-Pierre Isabitz. I'm not sure if this is a DVD I watched this. I think it was this one's really quite exceptional. They go to a lot of sites and have really good archaeology. The Triumph of Christianity, Bart Ehrman. So I think his most popular one probably How Jesus Became God, but then the Triumph of Christianity for how and why Christianity successfully spread. And the most recent one I actually just listened to a few weeks ago, Searching for the Historical Jesus, Jean-Pierre Isbotz. And honestly, I didn't think that one was that good because it was trying too much at the same time. It was basically like an anti-Christian book where it was trying to be like academic. So it was like trying to be everything to everybody and ended up being nothing to nobody. Saying like it's academic, but and then talking about the historical Jesus, but he didn't even cover, the Adam Green, like maybe Jesus didn't even exist, and then he's trying to convince you that even though like the legends of Jesus aren't really true, that still it could inspire Christians to, because generally most people are going to listen to the teaching course companies are Christian. America is still like 80% of America is Christian, and the biggest viewers of this type stuff are Christians. So I listened to that one, but I think my dad even bought it anyways. But to say I thought it was kind of weak, but still some decent information. So Harold Bloom. I think I have some of his books. I don't know if I have some of his books or I've read some of his books online or in other places. So I didn't. So he's a Gnostic. I'm not. It's not coming to mind so much. If you like Harold Bloom, but I'm familiar with Bloom, but not that well. So I guess I might wrap up. So keep this short. I'm trying to do 2 streams a week now. I have a lot of books on Christianity. Christianity is an important topic. As said, among Orthodox Jews, like it's almost like it's forbidden to go to church. It's forbidden to even read books about Christianity. And so like I would kind of like taboo, and I got involved in Interfaith, and usually I'm even like clerical, I'll even like I'll do Interfaith, but I'll say like, okay, like I'm a Jew, like we reject Jesus, like idolatry, but I do like the systematic theology, and generally, as the Talmud said, better an idol worshiper than an atheist. So that from a Talmudic point of view, atheism is worse than Christianity. But honestly, like I'm just not a Christian. It never really hit me, made sense to me. Like as a Jew, Judaism makes a lot of sense to me. Like I could see a lot of problems in Judaism. You would say like it's man-made, but it's like, okay, I'm a Jew. They're my legends. So even if they're not true, they're still my legends, my family history. As where Christianity, historically, it's tough to see. Like so the Freemasonry, the basis of Western society based on Christianity, the moral teachings of Christianity. Christianity can make you a better person. But I have to say, generally, I never had a strong interest in Christianity, like going to church, becoming Christian. Hinduism, like if you could see, I have 2 shelves on Christianity and another like 25 books on Christianity that I haven't even read. Hinduism, I have 2 complete shelves, like 500 books. I have maybe about 10 books on Hinduism that I haven't read. So almost all like like it interests me much more. And I fell out of Judaism. Like God forbid, Okay, yeah, Purple, thanks for tuning in. Derailed. No, I don't really have any like ancient, old, valuable books. I have some first editions. My father just gave me. I put up there um, um, the empires of early Latin America. I think these are actually somewhat valuable, maybe worth maybe even $100. This early edition, but I don't have any like manuscripts or old stuff. I have quite a few from my father. My father's been giving me recently from his collection. My father doesn't have really manuscripts, but he's got some older first editions like Modern Library. You can see on my eBay, I have a lot of stuff for sale, like first editions, even some autographed copies, but like none of those like, old manuscripts. I have some books from like the 1950s and 60s. Seraphim, you got Milton from like the 1840s. Yeah, I don't know how valuable those are. Some of those might, so like I have books like that I sell for eBay. I don't have anything with the 1840s. I mean, that might be substantially valuable. Like I do have like modern library books. Some of those, from like I have science fiction. I have a lot of science fiction first editions. Even like these ones right behind me that have been sitting on my desk for a while. Some of those are valuable. I have a lot of, old Dell books from the 40s, 50s, 60s. Yeah, I'm not really I'm not a collector like that. Maybe in the future, you have to know how to price these things, or if like you buy to hold on to or as an investment, or if you have them from like your family. Like if you have it because you held on from your ancestors and they gave it to you and you're holding on to it. You have to know like if it's rare. Sometimes it could be old, but it's not that rare. Even some things a few hundred years old are not particularly rare, and depending on their value. So I just mentioned like, I'm going through like I guess my midlife identity crisis. So I got to think a little bit about my Judaism. Like I fell out of my Judaism, and I saw that saying most Judaism they're by Orthodox rabbis for Orthodox Jews, and so I was taught Judaism by Orthodox rabbis for Orthodox Jews, and I studied it as a person who was interested in practicing Orthodox Judaism, not necessarily to teach it. And it really is only meaningful. Like I mentioned, my first one on my Jewish bookshelf on biographies. Most of the sages, nobody but any Orthodox Jews have even heard of these people and really even cares about these people. So if you're an Orthodox Jew, like these are the most important rabbis and the ones we try to follow in their footsteps, and we read their biographies to learn how to behave in the way that we believe God wants us to. In like a hagiography, legends of rabbis, and saying that we emulate the rabbi to emulate the way that God wants us to behave, and theoretical unbroken tradition to ancient times. That like if you were Catholic or a different sect. I mentioned I had the book from the Mormons or the Jehovah's Witness. The books that are written by the leaders of the group for the followers of the group. As opposed to some books that are written to proselytize to the skeptics, to the wider world, and cultic movements, like a lot of sectarianism, even to Christian groups. You could even say that about like Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox Jews, or even any religion. That in reality, it is an us against the world theology. They're saying, well, God chose us. Our tradition is true. The sages, leaders of our movement, are in fact the main sages and leaders for the whole world, even if the whole world doesn't recognize it. And so it tends towards an us against the world mentality, as opposed to the academic view, where you're looking at it, well, this is just what we believe. People need to believe in something, or there's historical anthropological, psychological reasons why people believe in this, and this is just our organizing principle in what we believe. Or as I mentioned, like the most popular of my tour of my libraries is the Freemasonry, and that you could interpret, like God, like the Demiurge. So I said, generally Jews have a demiurgic understanding to say, like, I am a Jew, I am the Demiurge. Like, we as the Jewish people are the force behind progress in the world. That's our goal, that's our purpose, that's what God chose us for, that's what we do. We're the force that drives progress forward. We are the Demiurge. And you could look at like Christian replacement theology and say we're the new Israel, we're the new church, to abstract that, and basically what they're saying, even if Seraphim, if you're like an Orthodox Christian or whatever, you might not use the terminology, but I mean, basically you're saying like you are the Demiurge, you are the force that propels progress forward. Progress that is meaningful and what God considers progress is only carried out through us. What you other people are doing who are not part of this, that's not actually progress. You are not the Demiurge. I am the Demiurge. And that's kind of how I like, I mentioned that from J.G. Bennett in his book, The Masters of Wisdom. Philo talks about the Demiurge like that. There's different understandings. But I say from a sectarian perspective, basically that's what people believe. They believe that their representative and their group are the exclusive representatives of the Demiurge. So the Freemasonic approach, you could just say the Demiurge is like the grand architect of the universe, the main monotheistic moving power that has some sort of purpose for creation and some sort of progression that we're going through, and like a priestly class or people or covenant that are the main push of that progress. So Freemason, we would recognize that progress could come through any legitimate tradition, even say that all the traditions are legitimate. So the Demiurge works through all of the great traditions, and because Seraphim is saying you could look into it. I was saying that even if, because obviously like Orthodoxy is Greek Orthodoxy, and Demiurge is a Greek theological term coming from Plato, and even Demiurge, like in the Timaeus and in the Greeks, is debated what it really means. But if you just take the generic understanding, the Demiurge is the force of progress, and you say, well, okay, I believe we're not actually making progress, but I mean, to some extent, it's reasonable to classify all religious systems as demiurgic beliefs, and that's generally I'd say that's a Freemasonic interpretation, and that my bias, and I'll eventually hopefully do a series on Gurdjieff, the Fourth Way, and I mentioned the 13 books that changed my life, J.G. Bennett on the Great Masters of Wisdom, where he talks about the Demiurge, and we call the Great Masters of Wisdom because they're representative of the Demiurge. That it's a Great Master of Wisdom because they personify the Demiurge in a force that pushed progress forward. But theologically, it might be problematic that you don't want to identify as the Demiurge, but saying as an occultist, I'll identify all spiritual movements with the Demiurge. And it's an interpretation of Freemasonry and the acceptance. So if you're in the Orthodox Jewish perspective, basically only Jews or the righteous among the Gentiles are part of the Demiurge, and everyone else isn't. And for all sects, like Christians, new replacement covenant theology, New Israel, you have this. It's us, and we're the ones that are propelling progress forward. We're the apple of God's eye, and so on and so on. And so it's tough to have. That's why I have the multiple truth hypothesis. And even I've lost my narrative voice as a Jew. I'm in the existential midlife identity crisis as a Jew, that I had thought when I studied Judaism that I would be an Orthodox Jew, or if I was teaching Judaism, I would be teaching Judaism to Orthodox Jews. But if you're teaching Judaism to Goyim, most of the people who watch Duvet are Goyim, and the message, I guess, is different. And so, okay, it's a universal message. It's like, okay, Duvid's message is for the Goyim, because Duvid is a half Jew, and Jews don't need to learn from Duvid. Jews could learn from Orthodox rabbis. So Duvid's message is for the Goyim. But then what is my message? And is my message Freemasonry? Is my message like the Demiurge? So I'm basically saying that, yes, you should submit yourself to the Demiurge, however you understand that, and be part of progress. And then, God forbid, like you could say, like Hitler and the Nazis and occultism were also demiurgic, that Hitler submitted himself to what he understood to be the demiurgic force, that progress, in order to go forward, he had to do what he had to do. And even Kabbalistically, you could, God forbid, say, the boom and bust cycle that Judaism says, or the punishment when, being the chosen people, we don't fulfill our duty, there has to be some sort of contraction, or like multi-demiurges, like, is there one force of progress, universal force of progress? Are there multiple forces of progress? And really, that's why I came up with the multiple truth hypothesis, because it's paradoxical and it's ununderstandable. And so most people have a conflict theory of knowledge, is saying like, well, Judaism and Christianity and Islam are mutually exclusive. They can't all be true. In fact, like if you look at the comparative eschatology, someone has to win in the end of days, and almost all of them predict a great war where their righteous will win and everyone else is going to die and perish, God forbid. Basically all the religions teach that. Judaism, Islam, Christianity all basically have an eschatology at the end of the day where they're righteous and the people who submitted to the righteous win and everyone else loses. Or their winning depends on how much they were on the right side of history. So you could have some like multiple truth hypothesis where it doesn't have to be zero sum, even though logically it would appear that they're contradictory and there has to be winners and losers. Western logic in general frames it in a zero sum mentality. Lex, they were saying, what are you, an atheist though? Are you agnostic? Are you a Freemason? So it's okay, it's true, that's why you follow no religion, but you're saying, well, what do you follow? God? Like, oh, I still believe in God. I believe in, I'm not an exclusive Jewish person. I don't necessarily believe that Judaism is the exclusive truth. I take a Freemasonic approach where I think all things could be true, even though logically they're mutually exclusive. So I live with the paradox. I live and embrace the dissonance. It's impossible. Logic dictates that these things say opposite things and they both cannot be true. So I live with the dissonance. Or you could just talk about general theology, that the multiple truth hypotheses break down into general theology, and you could have like a truth discovery function, like I talked about with Jennifer and Week in Review, where you say, well, there's a whole bunch of truth claims that various traditions make, and there might be levels of validity to the various truth claims. So if you looked at Judaism in the totality and listed all the truth claims that Judaism makes, and Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and all the world traditions, science and philosophy, and you just have this long list of truth claims, and a lot of those truth claims are going to be common through maybe all of them of different degrees, or some of them, and some of them are going to have different empirical value that could be verified logically, maybe even through scientific experiment, historically verified. Maybe some of them could make predictions about the future in a way that could be tested, and says, well, I'm a Jew, I'm sticking with my tradition. I believe that a lot of the claims of Judaism have reasonably high truth value, but I also accept that a lot of the claims of Judaism are likely false. So I'm not denouncing my own Judaism just because many of the claims of Judaism appear to be false. And even to say that I like Reform Judaism, that our ancestors or sages made mistakes and were wrong. So if you take the Orthodox perspective, you're not allowed to argue with the sages. The sages were never wrong. So if the sages said something that appears to be blatantly wrong, you have to like reinterpret the sages. You're not allowed to just say that the sages were wrong. They made a mistake. And say because the tradition goes back to God, and in the the basis of the power of the tradition is the unbroken chain and the authenticity going back to the prophets, and the authenticity is only authentic with some form of sage infallibility. Well, how do you know the sage is legitimate? How do you know the tradition is legitimate? Well, because there's an unbroken chain of transmission, and the sages who preserve the tradition are largely infallible. And so any Orthodox perspective of any school, even if you're a Protestant, you're like sola scriptura, you're saying, no, the scripture, it's infallible. But well, what about all the contradictions in the scripture? Or the Catholic tradition. So logically, it's very difficult. So if you're just trying your best, so saying, well, I don't know, I'm just trying my best. We'll see what happens when I die, or certain things I do have more or less success in the material realm. Certain things work more or less, and if you're going to test it, like, well, I'm going to be interfaith and try all these things from different religions, and what works I'll keep, and what doesn't work. So I'm do as a Hindu, and I did all these Hindu things, and the things that work I'm going to keep on doing, and the things from Judaism that don't work I'm going to drop, and I'm going to be like this mixed match of all these different traditions, which is kind of like Freemasonry. So I have one more shelf on African books. I have more books on like world religion, Native American stuff, or Eastern traditions. I have some other books on like teachings. I have books on Gnosticism or philosophy in a different section. So I have to organize my books. So I probably have for the next month and a half tour my library, although they'll be smaller, like 2 or 3 shelves. Like psychology, consciousness, science. I already did my math and physics, but I have like some science and engineering. I did civil engineering, but I have a lot of books on business, technology, history, politics. So I'll have to organize my books, but I'll keep this going. And then Saturday night, I'm going to try to do streams on Judaism. And good for you, Jennifer. Enjoy your boating and cooking. Yeah, and I like the Demiurge concept. To understand, saying, okay, you could be a Christian or a Jew, but this conceptual concept of the Demiurge, like I am a force of positive progress. And really that's basically what Jews believe, even secular Jews, Reform Jews, and really a lot of Christians. Like if you're deep into theology, be like, no, we are not the Demiurge. We do not believe in progress. But generally most people have demiurgic understandings of religion. And, it's basically, you say like, I'm a force for good in the world. That's basically what I'm saying. Like when I say, I believe, the demiurgic understanding, where you say through the submission and practice of my religion, I'm a force for good in the world. Through what I'm doing, I'm one small step in pushing progress in the world in the right direction. And really, like, a lot of atheists or, politics, to some extent, like most people have demiurgic beliefs, that they think that there's such a thing as progress and a force for good in the world, and that they're on that side. So it's, almost like a universal way of understanding esotericism, like the demiurgic understanding. So over the next few weeks, I will try to do a Saturday stream on Judaism. This week, I'm going to do part 2 of my history of Hasidism and focus on Hasidism and coming to America and setting up in America. Most Hasidism in America is post-war. There's a little base of Hasidism in America from the Eastern European immigration from like the 1880s through World War II, but mostly loosely affiliated Hasidim, not like many Rebbes or big scholars, but people of a Hasidic background that largely leave their tradition somewhat. Like Chabad, Karl and Stolen were in America, even in Detroit. The previous Lubavitch Rebbe was in Detroit in the 1920s, I believe, up to visit the small community, Karl and Stolen. But yeah, I mean, Sikh also. I haven't talked much about it. Like I don't know much about Sikh, but most Hasidism in America starts after the war, and generally the Hasidim advised against coming to America. And then after the war, a lot of Hasidim end up in Israel, but even New York City is probably the biggest center of Hasidus in the world. So I'll talk about that. And then the next 6 weeks after are what's called Shoivavim, which is an acronym for the first 6 weekly readings of the book of Exodus. And it's known to be a very dark time of the year. And you should take Torah study and repentance very seriously. So I'm going to try for the next 7 weeks, Saturday night, to stream Jewish topics, do like an Ask the Rabbi every Saturday night. So I'm not sure the topics. And so probably my tour of my library will last through the next 7 weeks. So if I carry my tour of my library 7 weeks and my Ask the Rabbi Saturday nights, God willing, seven more weeks, and then from there I hope to move on to consciousness topics, and specifically more on the multiple truth hypothesis and advancing my theory. And God willing, I hope to go to the Science of Consciousness Conference in Sicily, Italy in May. So I have to start looking into that. And, I have to renew my passport, and I look into how expensive the airline, or, I probably have to book months in advance to get a good price on the airline tickets and the hotel room. And, probably is going to cost a fortune, thousands of dollars if I'm going to go to the Science of Consciousness Conference. But as of now, I would like to plan to go to the Science of Consciousness Conference in May. So hopefully, sometime in February, I will start producing streams on the multiple truth hypothesis, more in science and consciousness and mathematics. And I may return to some of these various topics like Freemasonry. Like I'll probably do tour of my library, like on Gurdjieff and Interfaith, even though I only have a handful of Gurdjieff books, but I think that's an important topic. The Fourth Way in Gurdjieff. And I would like to actually do more streams on Freemasonry. Of all my tour of my library, my Freemasonry has over 200-hour views and over 500 views. So it's definitely the most successful of my streams on Freemasonry. And I know a lot about Freemasonry. It's an important topic that I think people like to know more about, and there's not much good information on it. So it's possible also I will do more streams on Freemasonry. But as of now, just 2 streams a week for the next month and a half or so, finishing up the tour of my library and doing Jewish topics. And then from there, we'll see you move on to different things. So we'll see how Week in Review goes. So hopefully you'll be able to use Week in Review of Church of Entropy. She's gotten big into Chat GPT. And so I don't know how much her progress her writing's making. I was also thinking of taking out a web page, like making duvid.com and putting my blog on duvid.com. So I might do that in the next month or so, make my web page and put my blog. And as I don't really have a venue for Judaism. So even though I studied Judaism, like I said, Judaism's kind of like for Orthodox for taught by rabbis for Jews. So it's unclear, how you teach Judaism to the general public. What is the message of Judaism to the Goyim? Like the 7 Noahide laws or something like that. So I'll probably do topical academic overviews that has some level of if you were an Orthodox Jew listening to this, that it would be semi-acceptable. But it's unclear that Duvid has a message of Judaism for the Goyim, or a message of Judaism for the Jews. But like the scholarship concepts, like the historical Jesus, various topics, so we'll see. So I did the tour of my library. I'm going to continue trying to do Jewish topics, deeper dives into them. And from those also, I'll try to go more in depth into some of the book recommendations, and then move on to consciousness. No problem, Purple. So with that, you sign off. God bless. Blessings to everybody. To any Christians out there, God bless you. So I'm not anti-Christian, but generally, I don't subscribe to Christianity. I think Christianity generally makes people is capable of making people a better person, and like the systematic theology, in the sense that Christianity is a good organizing principle that could lead to happy family life and cause a person to be spiritually filled, pray, repent, try to be a good person, be charitable. Like the veracity of the claims of, like, do I believe in Jesus Christ? Do I believe Jesus was the Messiah? Do I believe the truth claims of the religion? And to some extent, my opinion doesn't matter. Saying whether I believe it or not doesn't matter. Whether I believe it or not determines whether I'm a Christian or not. And so that perspective is, okay, I'm not a Christian, but I'm not here to say that my opinion, like I'm not here to falsify Christianity. My opinion on the matter doesn't matter. I could give scholarship, like, so what does the Talmud, what do the Jews say about Christianity? It's like, okay, generally this is what the books say, or the consensus of the sages saying. But that's why I have multiple truth hypothesis, to say that my idea about the truth claim of the veracity of Christianity is largely meaningless. Just to decide whether I'm going to be a Christian, which I'm not a Christian. But like, I do interfaith. I have Christian friends. I respect Christianity. It is probably one of the single most organizing principles of the West. I only have one video on speed reading. Just because you're here, I'll put it in the chat. So I might also return to speed reading. So I don't have enough feedback, like, to say I have like speed reading students to organize like a course where, if you could message me, you're in my Discord. So if you actually listen to my course or try the stuff and you want to talk about it, we can. But it's really just one course, and it's one of my more popular courses, 1,200 views. It's still regularly viewed, and I have it timestamped, so I have some slides, and in the first hour, I cover all the basics of speed reading. So if you just watch the first hour, I go over completely what you need to know for speed reading, and from there, like all the main concepts. And then I read some academic literature about the science of speed reading, chunking theory, and some academic stuff. So if you want to watch the whole video, but the first hour has all the basics on what you need to know to speed read. And like, generally, I would say I highly recommend speed reading. I teach speed reading constantly, like everywhere I go, to people I speak with, I will mention speed reading. I'll go over the basics of it, and the concept is extremely simple. So like, just the first half hour of the video, I cover all the basics, and they're basic techniques that you need to work on, but you can understand. And it's basically chunking theory, and the concept that, like, working memory, you can only take in 7 plus or minus 2 items at once, and you could take in speed reading by chunking together pieces of information. The same when you see a word like tour of my library, you don't need to do a separate piece of information like TOUR, tour. You just see one intake, tour. And also for phrases, so like tour of my library, you don't need to do 4 pieces of information. You could take that in one chunk. And through training you could take in phrases or even lines or paragraphs in chunks. And so that's the basics of speed reading. And generally, it's okay. You learn to do that as a youth, but you could keep on increasing your chunking ability. Most people don't do that past grade school, and hence their speed reading doesn't get quicker. But please watch the video. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk more about speed reading. Is one of my favorite topics, and speed reading is based on chunking theory, which is one of my areas of research. So I think for my test of speed reading, one, like, a lot of these books I read over a decade ago. Some of these books I read 20 years ago. So, just to test my memory, just looking at some of these books, how well do I remember what's in them? Having read them a long time ago, or if I wanted to reread them, which some of these Judaism streams I will reread and try to give more in depth. So, maybe I'll think more about speed reading. And once I'm finished with the tour of my library and start doing more advanced streams on consciousness and chunking theory. Chunking theory is one of my main areas of research, and what I've wanted to get into is the science of expertise. And so I was mentioning, if I actually, make my duvid.com and put my blog together, I probably won't be writing about Judaism. I'll probably be writing about science of consciousness and science-related topics. So with that, thanks everyone tuning in. God bless. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And Ask the Rabbi, History of Chassidim Part 2, Saturday night at 6 o'clock. Next week will be another tour of my library. I may not decide till close to even Wednesday. I have to see. I have to organize a few shelves because right now most of my rest of my library is unorganized, so I have to go through and organize it and to do it. So doing this tour of my library is helping me organize my library, and through that organize my thoughts and put me in position to hopefully move forward on my own research on chunking theory and multiple truth hypothesis, science of consciousness, and my goal, God willing, of going to the Science of Consciousness conference this year in May in Sicily. So hopefully me and Jennifer Week in Review will also continue to have meaningful progress. So God bless. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.